Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today, I will provide a brief introduction to college student mental health and maybe more of a whirlwind. I will cover the scope of the issue pre-pandemic and share data on the prevalence of mental health disorders. I'll discuss how things have been changing over time, who is affected, and what we're beginning to see in terms of the impacts of the pandemic. Finally, I will discuss opportunities and strategies for responding. I imagine that rather than being new or unexpected, what I'm sharing will likely reflect what you're seeing and have been noticing with your students. My goal is to give you a taste of the data that are available to you as you pursue your mental health efforts and make the case for investing in student mental health when there are so many other things that demand our time, energy, and resources. The data I present today come primarily from the Healthy Mind study, started by Professor Daniel Eisenberg. Our team is now based at Boston University, the University of Michigan, where I'm a co-investigator, Wayne State, and UCLA. The study is an annual web-based survey administered on college campuses across the country, as you can see here in our map of participating institutions. Over 450 schools and 400,000 students have participated since 2005. A wide range of colleges and universities participate: public, private, small, large, predominantly white, minority serving, community colleges, rural schools, urban schools, really everything in between. The Healthy Mind study uniquely provides extensive population-level mental health data, information on the total population of college students at participating institutions through a selection of a random sample of students at each school. So our data is capturing more than just the smaller portion of students that are making it to the counseling center. What do the data tell us about the state of college student mental health? Healthy Minds data show that mental health disorders are common, consequential, and largely untreated on college campuses. Pre-pandemic, 46% of students were experiencing a significant mental health concern. The prevalence of problems was growing, and almost half of students with a diagnosable disorder were not receiving treatment. These data come from the 2018-2019 Healthy Minds survey. We use clinically validated screening instruments, which assess symptoms of disorders and have cutoff points for determining a likely diagnosis if the person were to see a clinician. 18% of students are experiencing symptoms of major depression. 14% are experiencing symptoms associated with a diagnosis of severe anxiety. 10% are experiencing an eating disorder. 24% are engaging in non-suicidal self-injury, and 14% had serious thoughts of attempting suicide in the last year. Looking across these categories shown here, 46% of students have one or more of these mental health problems. This translates into approximately 9.2 million college students experiencing a serious, diagnosable mental health concern in the past academic year. High rates of mental illness in college are a product of some students coming to college with them and other students developing them while in school. College is not a risk factor per se. College students are at approximately the same risk of problems as young adults not in college. But college presents opportunities to exacerbate or mitigate existing problems and to prevent problems where they haven't yet developed. Let me pause a moment here to note that the data I just shared and will be referring to throughout this presentation captures students who exceed the symptom cutoff on validated screening tools for clinically significant major mental health problems. Far more students would and do report that they struggle with their mental health. Pre-COVID, 53% of students reported feeling hopeless and 87% reported feeling overwhelmed in the past 12 months on the National College Health Assessment. None of us perform our best when we are feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. Colleges need to respond both to students facing diagnosable mental health disorders and to the feelings of overwhelm and hopelessness experienced by a majority of the student body. Getting back to the data on mental health disorders, we see overwhelming evidence across our study and others that the prevalence of mental health problems is increasing among students. For example, alarmingly, we have observed a rise in past year suicidal ideation from 6% in 2007 to 14% in 2020. While the prevalence of mental health problems has been on the rise over the last decade, so have treatment rates. Unfortunately, still, too many students experiencing a mental health problem are not receiving care. In our data from 2018 to 2019, we found that only 39% of students with a diagnosable mental health problem were currently receiving treatment. For those of you who are more visual, this section here in teal represents the proportion of your student body likely currently struggling with a diagnosable mental health disorder. And this section here in teal represents the proportion of your students struggling with a diagnosable mental health disorder and not receiving treatment. More than a quarter of your students. Who is experiencing concerns and receiving treatment varies considerably. We see several significant inequities. Sexual and gender minority students experience a significantly greater burden of concerns. For gender minority students, including those who identify as transgender, genderqueer, or another non-binary gender, 57% meet criteria for depression, compared to 28% of cisgender students, those whose current gender identity aligns with their sex assigned at birth. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer students have nearly double the risk of mental health problems compared to heterosexual students. There are also significant disparities in treatment receipt. In multiple studies, Asian international students have showed the lowest rate of help seeking compared to all other students. Students of color experiencing symptoms of a mental health disorder are far less likely to receive treatment than their peers. Here are the data. This graph shows the percent of students not currently receiving treatment among those who screen positive for one or more mental health disorders. Compared to 60% of white students with significant symptoms and no treatment, 63% of Native American, 67% of Pacific Islander, 72% of Hispanic, 73% of Arab, 74% of Black, and 78% of Asian students are not receiving treatment. Efforts are needed to ensure greater equity and access to mental health care and treatment for those who are suffering. As I imagine you are observing, we are likely going to see a significant worsening of the situation due to COVID. The pandemic has led to unprecedented stressors, isolation, and disruption, as we've all experienced, and this has occurred for students, staff, and faculty. In summarizing some key impacts on the slides, I'm triangulating across several data sources, and I'm reporting on trends that we're seeing in multiple places. Mental health impacts are obviously an emerging issue, and it's not like we're all the way through the pandemic yet. No one data source is perfect, so I'm most trusting the patterns that we're seeing in population data, clinical data, and on and off campuses. In the Healthy Mind Study and the National College Health Assessment, as well as other studies, we're seeing a worsening of severe depression among college students, but we're seeing a decline in binge drinking. We're seeing significant worsening of academic impairment and distress. And data across multiple sources indicates that COVID-19 has increased barriers to mental health care and resulted in fewer students accessing services at campus counseling centers. While there is no question that COVID-19 is profoundly affecting all students, several sources of data indicate disproportionate negative impacts on students with marginalized identities, especially those with multiple intersecting marginalized identities. We're seeing disproportionate impact on transgender and non-binary students, disproportionate negative impacts on bisexual, pansexual, queer, lesbian, and questioning students, and disproportionate impact by race and ethnicity. To give just two examples, this graph shows that across all students, the pandemic interfered with access to mental health care. It was worse initially, as we show in the gray bars, immediately in the spring of 2020, and it got a bit better in the fall, the teal bars. This is really thanks to huge efforts on campuses. But we still continue to see significant inequities, such that Arab and American Indian and Alaska Native students report more barriers to care than their peers. This one breaks my heart. Looking at the proportion of students in fall of 2021 who reported to us that a close friend or family member died of COVID-19, it's almost 8% of students overall, but 18% of Native American students, 16% of Pacific Islander students, 17% of Hispanic students, 14% of Arab students, and 18% of Black students have experienced this loss. We know that faculty are seeing the impacts of COVID-19 firsthand and have really been on the front lines in terms of responding, given that many students are separated from on-campus services. Healthy Minds has a new survey that's going out to faculty and staff. You can encourage your schools to participate. We ran a pilot study in January of 2021 with faculty at 12 schools across the country. We found that 80% of faculty report talking with students about mental health and wellness. Only 51%, however, report having a good idea about how to recognize a student in distress. 73% report welcoming professional development on the topic of student mental health. Concerningly, 21% reported that supporting students in mental health or emotional distress has taken a toll on their own mental health. I imagine some of you have experienced this. Almost half of faculty strongly agree that their institution should invest more in supporting faculty mental health and well-being at this time. I suspect that we are just beginning to see the mental health effects of the pandemic, and more will emerge both for students and faculty as we return to our schools. I recommend following several sources in order to monitor evolving impacts over time. And the ongoing Healthy Minds study, where we report data quarterly and semesterly, can be a good resource to you. Why is the growing scope of mental health challenges something that we should all care about? Early prevention, detection, and treatment of mental health disorders improves academic outcomes, career trajectories, lifetime earnings, health, relationship satisfaction, and more. It also saves lives. Suicide is the second leading cause of death on college campuses. Mental health treatment and support is key to suicide prevention. The majority of mental health disorders first appear during the typical college age years, and the earlier treatment is received, the better the lifetime outcomes. College offers a critical time and a unique opportunity for intervening, given that campuses, well, at least usually, shape where students are living, working, playing, eating, sleeping, and usually obtaining their health care. Data demonstrate that untreated mental health disorders are associated with lower GPA, enrollment discontinuity, and dropout. Longitudinal research by the Healthy Minds team showed that being depressed in college is associated with 2 times greater risk of departing without graduating. Last fall, 83% of students reported that their mental health interfered with their academics 1 or more days in the last month. Given the impact of mental health on college persistence, Daniel Eisenberg has explored the economic case for investing in college student mental health using data from the Healthy Minds study. We know that reduced depression is associated with increased student satisfaction, retention, and lifetime productivity. This results in benefits for colleges as well as society. Increased student satisfaction and retention improves institutional reputation and alumni giving. Increased retention results in increased tuition dollars for colleges and universities. Eisenberg and colleagues estimated the return on a college's investment in reducing student depression. For less than $1 million, a large university could expect to reduce depression in 1,000 students, which would prevent 40 of those students from dropping out, resulting in more than $2 million in increased tuition and $8 million in increased lifetime productivity. There's a tool on the Healthy Minds website to calculate these numbers for your institutions and your efforts. My hope today is to not just overwhelm you with the magnitude of student mental health challenges, but to convince you that we are in the midst of an important moment with real opportunity to take action to better support student mental health. College presidents are currently and repeatedly ranking student mental health as their top concern. Student mental health, followed by faculty and staff mental health, has been ranking above concerns about enrollment, financial viability, and many other important issues. At the same time, the recently passed American Rescue Plan Act means that $40 billion in funding is currently being distributed to colleges and universities. Both the student and institutional proportion of the funding may be used for mental health. You have an opportunity to help ensure your institution responds to student mental health at this crucial time. To give you some ideas and some inspiration, I will wrap up today providing a few examples of how colleges and universities are responding. Many colleges are taking a public health approach to addressing student mental health. Some of you may be familiar. For others, it may be a newer concept that improving student mental health goes far beyond providing excellent services in the counseling center. Schools are focusing on mental health promotion, prevention, intervention, and postvention. The approach includes addressing basic needs such as food and housing, developing student life skills, promoting social networks, identifying students at risk, and encouraging help seeking, often through powerful peer-to-peer efforts. The approach includes restricting access to potentially lethal means for suicide, such as hosting medicine take-back events and installing barriers on bridges and parking garages. The approach involves enhancing mental health services. Finally, it involves improving crisis management policies and practice. A key component of a successful public health approach is assessing needs and evaluating intervention effectiveness through collecting and monitoring data over time. This is especially essential during a turbulent time when needs are changing rapidly. Other campuses are taking a life course approach to student mental health. For example, prior to students applying and enrolling, what does your school do to outreach to middle and high school students? When doing so, do you emphasize the importance of mental health in general and to their success in college? As students matriculate and enroll, are they asked to complete a health history form? Does it include mental health and substance use history? Are there protocols in place for informing students who self-identify with these histories about the availability of support services before they start? As students transition to your institution, is mental health addressed at orientation and in first-year courses? Do you have campaigns or resources to support student mental health during stress points or risk periods at your school? For example, what type of outreach do you do to first-year students when they take their first set of finals and receive their first set of grades? What type of training do you provide to those who advise students? Are advisors prepared to recognize, respond, and refer students in distress? Do they know about the connections between mental health and academic outcomes? Finally, how do you help your students prepare to graduate from your institution? Is mental health included in these resources and incorporated into programming that supports students' transition from college to career? Other campuses are looking across settings on campus and taking a health and all policies and places approach. For example, Simon Fraser University has a school-wide initiative to embed well-being in all physical spaces, learning environments, the school culture and climate, and its policies. Institutions are carefully constructing dorms and libraries to give access to sunlight and nature. Other institutions, such as George Mason University and the University of Texas, have initiatives focused on well-being and learning environments. Other schools are looking beyond the classroom and working on addressing the broader culture and climate at the institution through campaigns such as the Resilience Project at Stanford and the Story of Failure initiative at Tulane. These initiatives focuses on normalizing failure, growing resilience, and supporting students as they experience setbacks that are a normal part of a rigorous education. Finally, many campuses are making important changes to the campus policies to better support student mental health. Campuses have improved leave of absence policies, making sure they're equitable across mental and physical health concerns and clearly communicated to students. Colleges have improved policies impacting gender minority students, including banning discrimination, simplifying processes to indicate and change names and pronouns, and expanding insurance coverage for transition-related services. These all have implications for mental health. Schools like the University of Minnesota are revising policies around policing, recognizing how harmful policing can be for mental health, especially among Black students and students of color. In these times of a global pandemic and publicized racist violence, several schools are working to take a trauma-informed approach. There are several great resources discussing how to adopt SAMHSA's trauma-informed principles and practices in the higher education setting. The approach involves all members of the community realizing and recognizing the wide-ranging effects of trauma, working to avoid re-traumatization, ensuring safety, facilitating peer support, fostering collaboration and empowerment, and more. Last, but certainly not least, I want to emphasize that what you do with your teaching and in your classes makes a difference. Research shows that a warm tone on your syllabus and content normalizing reaching out for assistance can help connect students to resources. Being open about your own struggles and successes can serve as a model for students. Knowing how to recognize, respond, and refer students in distress helps you be prepared for when challenges arise. Finally, growing research demonstrates opportunities to enhance student mental health through reducing classroom stressors. Some of those have been discussed in the conference today, such as those associated with testing and assessment, and fostering conditions for well-being, such as social connectedness, mindfulness, growth mindset, inclusivity, gratitude, self-compassion, and life purpose. I think we can and should be doing more for student mental health. And I think the data demonstrate that it is in the best interest of our students, our institutions, and society to do so. We at the Healthy Minds Network are eager to support and contribute to and learn from your important work. We share many, many resources on our website. I'd be happy to tell you more about them. And with that, I will close and open it up for your questions. Thank you for your time. All right, here. Lots of questions. I am seeing, yes, how to deal with wait lists at college counseling centers. I think there are many approaches to address that challenge that's seen at many institutions. I do think that that is one of the reasons why a public health approach is so important right now and needed, and the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this challenge. So thinking about how we can be building in health promoting opportunities throughout the institution and addressing problems before they get to the point that students are needing counseling services. So that's one approach. I also think many schools are getting more creative about systems to screen students and get them to the right providers. And more institutions are employing and working with student peers, training peers to be available in group formats to support students, as well as getting creative about other online platforms and teletherapy. I think many institutions needed to adopt those in the pandemic. And I think at many schools, they're working with those systems to try and creatively respond to the overwhelming need and requests for counseling services. Let's see, another question here. Great question. What have we learned from the pandemic about what does not work for students? What must we leave behind? What must we change moving forward? It's funny, I really get in the mode of trying to think about what we should be doing. So I think about how the pandemic has taught us about the importance of social support and the value of inclusive and supportive campus communities. I think many students have struggled in the isolation away from campus and sort of trying to plug into campus resources when they're not surrounded by their peers. But I do also think we've learned some important things about accessibility and serving students with a wide range of needs, and recognizing our need to be more flexible, and our ability to be more flexible in serving the diverse range of students and learners that we have at our institutions. I'm seeing another question about let's see, how can the faculty, help when the counseling center is understaffed, and what can faculty do to better understand how to respond to students and recognize and being trained to have those conversations? That is a great question. I would say one thing to do is to advocate at your institution about the need for and the value of those trainings. They do exist. There are both online trainings and courses and programs, as well as in-person trainings and courses. Some of them focus very specifically on suicide prevention. Some of them address responding to students' mental health needs more broadly. But I would consider really encouraging your institution to evaluate what program and type of organization might be the best model and format for your school, and speak up about the need for the training. I think, again, faculty are on the front lines. And so I think it's really important to point out the extent to which you are seeing these issues arise. You are seeing them interfere with students' academics, and the degree to which you feel perhaps not equipped to be responding. I think one thing that the data do show is that you don't have to have all the answers, and you certainly don't need to be, you're not being asked to be a counselor or a mental health clinician, but there is a way that every door and every interaction at the university can be a right one, and you can play a role in referring students to services. I understand if the counseling center at your school may have a long wait list, that's something else to speak up about. But I think having a sense of the wide range of social support and mental health support, academic support resources at the institution, and playing a role working to help get students into the right door where they can get some support, plays a really powerful role for students in their lives. There is a question about URL resources and a link to the website. Yes, let me finish answering questions and I will share that link. I can also make sure that the links and the resources are available afterwards and shared. It's healthymindsnetwork.org is the Healthy Minds website. And that from there, you can link to many of the different resources and information. But I will be sure to share those resources as well. Someone asked, are there free counseling centers that students can access? There is some variation across institutions about the degree to which counseling services are provided for free to students at the school. So at many institutions, there are mental health fees built in to student fees and other avenues for providing free counseling. So I would say probably at the majority of at least four-year institutions these days, there's at least some volume of free mental health counseling services through the institution. I know that there are less resources for providing counseling and mental health services at community colleges. That's a challenge I'm working to address in some of my current research. But I know that many community colleges are getting very creative about partnering with the local community and really trying to refer students out to local resources and counseling that may be available through community mental health services. There is not sort of one national place where free counseling is available, but I will mention the crisis text line. Any person anywhere can text the crisis text line or phone into the suicide prevention hotline if they are in crisis and needing some immediate support to be safe and to learn more about resources. I see another comment here. We have just about another minute left that someone mentioned a great resource from the World Health Organization to help faculty serve students. I look forward to learning more about this resource. Perhaps this can be shared out with the audience. The World Health Organization is obviously, I would say, the rest of the world is doing a bit of a better job, I think, understanding student mental health and addressing it. So I think we have a lot to learn from global efforts, not just those happening here in the US. Someone asked, can we engage in a comparative study with students in African universities? Yes, I do think there is more room to, again, be studying this in a global context. There is currently a world study examining mental health. I can send some links to those papers and research as well. I don't know the full scope of the number of institutions, but the Healthy Minds Network is largely based in the US. We have actually done our survey in a few other locations in Canada, in China, I think in Chile, but there are some other global mental health studies and research underway, and I'm happy to provide those resources and more information afterwards there as well. Let's see, I think we are just about out of time here. So I'm going to wrap up, but again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your commitment to student mental health. And we'll be sure to, again, encourage you to visit the Healthy Minds website to learn more. And I will be sure to follow up with resources in the future. Thank you again for your time.